Hey everyone, it's Mojaxx back in the DJcity UK lab. Today we are looking at this beast. This is the RANE 70, but it's a very special edition designed in conjunction with A-Trak. Let's get to it. Some people might not be aware of just how much input gear manufacturers solicit from well-known DJs when planning their products. It happens constantly behind the scenes with all the big brands and helps us all get better kit. But it's far less common to actually have a DJ's name on something like a mixer. I'm sure you'll correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I believe the first was DJ Jazzy Jeff's Gemini back in the 80s. Then the Invisible Scratch Pickles were all over Vestax gear in the 90s, Stanton had some bits, and of course Z-Trip had his special edition of the RANE 62, but it remains quite a rare thing. So I was pleasantly surprised when the A-Trak signature edition of the RANE 70 arrived at my door. And even more delighted to discover that this is not just a branding exercise. A-Trak really has worked with RANE to create his perfect version of the mixer. The extra development work put into it does impact the price a little. It has a street price of $1,700 versus the $1,500 of the regular 70, but this is definitely a case where you can see where the money has been spent. The first thing to talk about is how it looks. Of course, aesthetics always come in a distant third place to performance and value in terms of priorities, but it's still nice to have kit that looks good, and there's no doubt that the A-Trak Signature Edition looks very, very good indeed. As with the regular 70, it's constructed from steel, but this time it has a silver finish. The side panels are powder coated in a fairly matte finish, which looks dope, but the top panel is even better. A Lexan sheet over the steel plate means that you get a slightly shinier look, and the fully custom graphics and fonts will never wear off, without the surface being too much of a fingerprint magnet. A-Trak's creative output over the years has always had an eye towards aesthetics. Look at his label Fool's Gold, for example, so it was clear that effort would be made with the graphics on here. To complement all of that, you have a full set of ridged knobs with aluminium caps, reminiscent of the kind found on classic rotary mixers like RANE's own 2016. Put it all together and you have a mixer which looks completely unique and, to my eyes, absolutely stunning. To be honest, video doesn't do it justice. It looks even better in the flesh. It also looks awesome next to a pair of silver Technics 1200s, even if it's not quite the same silver. From here on in, I'll stick to discussing functionality alone, but be assured this is a gorgeous piece of hardware. At its core, the RANE 70 A-Trak Signature Edition is still a RANE 70, and whilst normally I would refer you here to my original 70 review, it has occurred to me that I never got round to doing one, which is extra weird as I've used the 70 so much in the past year. RANE's other entry in the battle mixer space, the 72 Mark II, is a dope product with a lot to recommend it, but on the whole I'm definitely more of a 70 kind of DJ. Whilst the 72 is truly an all-singing, all-dancing mixer, it can sometimes feel a bit overloaded with features for those who simply want to rock a party. The 70 is a lot less busy, and I've generally found myself leaning towards that one for my sets instead. So let's go through the specs and performance of the regular 70 here, and where the A-Trak edition differs, I will highlight that. Construction, beefy as you like. I've already mentioned the steel build, and it's incredibly solid. Nothing more to add really, these things are tanks. One note here on the knobs though, many years ago I had issues with RANE's use of plastic pots, and they argued the case for them well enough that I've since then dropped the subject. But interestingly, the knobs on the A-Trak edition are much higher profile than the stock RANE knobs, and so highlight the inherent wobbliness of those plastic pots much more. Is it enough to make me dislike the knobs on the A-Trak edition? No, on the whole they feel great, but I feel it's worth noting in case you're particularly sensitive to that kind of thing. Connectivity is great. There are 2 line level inputs on each channel, one switchable to phono, and both can be sent to the DVS inputs in Serato DJ Pro. 2 mic inputs are included, both switchable to instrument line level and both with combo XLR and jack sockets. Mic 1 is controlled on the top panel and mic 2 on the front. They both have tone controls, and mic 1 also includes echo and talk over. I'm sure many DJs would prefer a 2-band EQ over a tone control, but they do sound good regardless. As usually found on RANE battle mixers, you have session in and out, each with level controls of their own, and so that gives you an extra line input and unbalanced output if needed. Other outputs are fully balanced with XLR master out and booth output on jacks. Power is delivered by a regular IEC connector with a worldwide power supply. When it comes to USB connections, you have the now expected dual USB-B connections for computers and a pair of USB-A sockets. Those are primarily designed for use with the RANE 12s, but will also work with other low power draw devices. A quick note for phase users, with the HID mode for Serato now, you can use one of those ports for your phase box, but they still don't provide enough power to charge the remotes. The Q circuit is comprehensive, both sizes of headphone jack, a fader between decks, and a Q master blend knob with a split Q switch on the front. Although I personally prefer a Q switch for each channel rather than that fader, I can't argue with any of that. The only disappointment is that, unlike the session input, which features its own Q button, there is no way to cue the sampler in Serato DJ Pro. We'll talk about sound quality now, which is another area where A-Trak has made some changes to his version. There are a number of tweaks which have been made primarily in the low end, mainly involving reducing certain frequencies to make the bass more punchy and defined overall. The differences are very, very subtle, and you are unlikely to notice much difference on anything less than a top-end club system. So whilst I do appreciate the effort that A-Trak and RANE have put into this area, honestly, I'm not that fussed, as to me, the original 70 already sounded superb. I primarily use that with vinyl for 45 sets, and the phono preamps are simply excellent. The audio interface is great too, and so both mixers always deliver a very warm, rounded sound, whether playing analog or digital sources. I covered the Mag 4 faders when I looked at the 72 Mark II, and on the whole, they've received a much better reaction than the older Mag 3s. You have them in all three slots on both versions of the 70, with cut-in distance adjustable in settings, reverse switches all round, and external tension adjustment for the crossfader. Overall, I have no complaints. They feel a lot more like RANE faders of old than the 3s did, and durability seems to be completely on point this time around. I will mention the filters briefly. Functionally, they're the same on both versions with adjustable resonance, but I really dig the oversized knobs on the A-Trak version. A small thing, but a nice touch. The integration with Serato DJ Pro is very smooth, as you might expect. The 16 pads offer independent modes for each deck and have the great MPC style feel we're used to on RANE products now. Illumination level is decent as long as you have daytime mode on. I can't imagine why you wouldn't, as they are very dim otherwise. The pad modes are pretty standard with hot cue, pitch play, saved loop, loop roll, flips, sampler, transport, and the awesome new scratch bank, as well as a couple of custom user sets. Plenty to be getting on with. Auto loops are controlled by on-off buttons, and there are half and double length buttons which can also be used for manual loops. Track browsing and loading is taken care of very smoothly by endless rotaries for each deck, which can be pushed to load, as well as back and prepare buttons. Another small change with the A-Trak edition is that the buttons between the up faders, previously marked as instant doubles, are now marked sync. This makes sense, as A-Trak is one of the turntable DJs like Craze and SK83 who have fully embraced sync for their performances, although it doesn't really matter either way, as like on the original 70, those can be changed in settings to do sync, instant doubles, or silent cue, depending on your preference. We move on to effects then, and here A-Trak has definitely brought some new stuff to his version. Common to both versions are the excellent paddles, which can be removed and turned around if you prefer horizontal action instead. I always like the feel of these. There's a positive click one way, and the springs are nicely damped. When it comes to internal effects, both versions feature echo, reverb, flanger, and phaser. These all sound decent and have a good degree of control on a secondary menu. BPMs are taken from Serato DJ Pro when using that, but one definite improvement over the 72 is the ability to dial in a BPM manually when playing from other sources, rather than relying on tap tempo alone. I'd still like to see RANE include audio BPM detection in their mixes though. It's with the final effect in the bank where A-Trak's changes become obvious with his version. The regular 70 has a delay there, but he's added the all-new fader effects, which are deep. When enabled, the up fader for that channel is disabled, and it instead takes on new functions depending on which type of fader effects is in use. And there are quite a few to choose from. Filter has a choice of high, low and bandpass, and the fader controls the cutoff point. Roll is what the name implies, with the beat length changing as the fader goes up and down, and the depth knob controlling the wet and dry level. You can also high pass the roll. There's a pitch shifter. You can choose minor or major scales for that. There's also a very fun ring modulator, again with options like the bass frequency and whether you increase or decrease from there. And finally, there are the synth effects. Plenty of controls over these are in there. You can select sine, sawtooth, square or triangle waves. Fader controls the pitch and depth controls the volume. You can also choose the root note and which octave it's in, meaning you can play anything from a growling bass to a high-pitched squeal. This kind of stuff is undoubtedly cool and will definitely be used to great effects in the hands of a DJ like A-Trak. You can already see him doing some very creative stuff in his first demo videos with the mixer. Will it be something a non-turntablist DJ like myself will get much use out of? Probably not, if I'm being realistic. But the only thing you lose versus the original 70 is the delay, which I can live without, so on balance I'd definitely take the A-Trak setup instead. I will note that if you're into Serato DJ Pro's software effects, these can be controlled by the mixer too. You can even combine hardware and software effects together if you so wish, although that involves a lot of switching things back and forth, and that can be a bit challenging if you aren't laser focused. The final thing to talk about, common to both versions, is the menus. Initially, the menus on the 70 may seem a little restrictive, especially compared to the big touchscreen on the 72, but they're still easily navigable with simple knob and joystick control. The 1.6-inch OLED display itself is crisp and clear too. If you pick up either version of the 70, it's definitely worth digging around in those menus, as the mixers have a lot of options which may not be immediately obvious. Things like saving your preferred settings for each hardware effect to load as default. Both versions of the 70 are a lot deeper than they might appear at a glance. So there you go, my take on the RANE 70 A-Trak Signature Edition. When I'm speaking about a product like this, which is like an upgrade and iterative version of a previous product, there are really two groups of people who I'm speaking to. The first of whom is people who've already got a regular RANE 70. They might be looking at this and thinking, have I made a mistake? Should I have waited? Should I sell my regular 70 and get this instead with the financial hit that will entail? To those people I say, nah, don't worry about it, because fundamentally at its core this is still a RANE 70. It's not like a different mixer altogether. If you've got a 70, you're happy with it, that will carry on serving you very well. You're not missing out on much by not having this version. But if you're looking for a high-end battle mixer, the original 70, that's kind of caught your eye, you're kind of into that. Is it worth the extra cost to go and get the A-Trak version instead? I'm going to say it probably is, because it is changed. It's not dramatically better. Like stuff like the sound profile, that's very subtle, very subtle. The original 70 sounds great, you know, but it is there. It is a change that's been made. The synth effects, personally, I can just give or take, because I'm not a turntablist. I'm a regular DJ. I can guarantee I will never use those in a set. So it's just, if that really appeals to you, that's definitely going to be a real added value. For me, I'm not that fussed. But the finish on this thing, and it's hard to describe, like, it looks so much better in the flesh than it does on video. It is a beautiful piece of hardware. This is one of the nicest looking bits of kit that I've seen in my whole career reviewing DJ gear. It is stunning to look at. And yes, you can achieve custom looks with skins and knobs and things like that. Yeah, that can be done. But an overall visual transformation like this, that's pretty much impossible to pull off. This thing is just absolutely beautiful. So personally, I would go for this version over the regular 70. If you have a regular 70, or if that's the only one you can afford out of the two, don't feel bad, because the regular 70 is still a very, very good mixer indeed. This one's just got that kind of extra shiny goodness. It is beautiful. It is absolutely stunning. I'd be very happy to have this as my main battle mixer. Thanks for watching today. Make sure you subscribe for all our future tips, tricks, and product reviews. I'll see you soon.